Hey, everybody. Welcome to Rob Nelson Live. Happy Monday night. Hope you had a good Easter weekend. Here's a question. The All-Star Game's being canceled. And it's about race. But when we make everything about race, do we actually make it worse for the people we're trying to help? It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Rob Nelson Live. Happy Monday. Let's get right into it. The All-Star Game. The All-Star Game got canceled. By the way, those of you out there, I see some of you already on social, on YouTube and Facebook. Dive in with your comments. We'll pop them up. I'll go back and forth with you. Not all of them, but as many as I can. Love the regular audience and listeners. One of our regulars, I think you're online now, Tyler, was looking forward to tonight's show so I could bash Governor DeSantis for giving vaccines to the wealthy. Tyler, that's going to have to wait. I think I'm going to do COVID on Wednesday, and I'll take on DeSantis. I'll take on both sides. The question is, will you? All right, the All-Star Game, canceled. Or, well, not canceled, canceled in Atlanta, bumped out of Atlanta over the Georgia voting law. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the Georgia voting law because I've done that a bunch of times. And, made the case that I think, if it is restrictive, it's not about race. And in fact, it's actually not that restrictive. Oddly enough, the biggest issue people seem to have is you got to have a vote, have to have a valid state ID to get an absentee ballot, which, by the way, you have to have a valid state ID to get your tickets at will call at the Atlanta Braves games, including the All-Star Game. Go figure. But if you're going to cancel the All-Star Game, maybe over the voting law, maybe you should pull out of New York as well, because New York's voting laws don't allow you to give food and refreshment with 150 feet of the people in line. And they also require you to have an excuse, a reason to ask for an absentee ballot, which Georgia's new law requires you to have no excuse. Just ask for a ballot, you get it. Just prove you're you. But let's just leave alone whether or not the actual law is or isn't restrictive, because we've had that battle. Either way, I don't think it's about people being black. I think, if anything, it's about people trying to make sure the people they want to vote for them, just like when they gerrymander all their districts. But either way, is canceling the All-Star Game, is Coca-Cola, Delta, all these companies jumping on board the bandwagon make any sense? And I'm going to argue no. Canceling the All-Star Game is going to cost the city of Atlanta upwards of $100 million. Of all people, Stacey Abrams, the hardcore advocate, around election reform, and, a prominent, both a candidate and a prominent outspoken person around the Georgia runoff elections, actually came out and was like, I don't think it's a good idea to be doing this. I'm all for punishing Republicans, but who are you hurting? You're cutting off $100 million in business. And most of that business, well, certainly corporations and bigger companies will make money from it. It's a lot of the hospitality business, right? It's hotels, it's restaurants, it's bars, it's Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, taxi drivers, it's service industries. So you're essentially hurting the very people you supposedly want to help. You're literally, after all this, after COVID, you are like giving him a punch in the gut, taking the All-Star Game away over a political battle, over a law that's debatable. It's debatable whether or not it is restrictive. I'll go back and forth with anybody that I think it's not, but at the best, it's debatable. And you're going to punish the very people. My point on this is, this has nothing to do. This has absolutely zero to do with whether Georgia's voting law is really restrictive. Joe Biden knows it's not Jim Crow on steroids. He lived through Jim Crow. He knows it's not a poll tax. He knows it's not a literacy tax. He knows it's not a swim in this pool, not that pool, if you're white or black. This is pure politics. It's all it is. It's politics 101. Bash the other side every chance you get. And F the people you're really screwing. You're not really helping black people. You're not really helping impoverished communities. Cancel the All-Star Game. Look at that. Woohoo, MLB's on board. You're just punishing the very people who actually would benefit from having work right now, jobs right now. And at the end of the day, Coca-Cola, Delta, all jumping on the bandwagon. They put tons of money into the Republican legislature before the bill was passed. They're not anti the bill. They're just, we talked to our people and we decided this is the best way to make sure our product, our brand does well in the current political climate. They would change on a dime. And all of you, even the most cynical least cynical, have to know that's true. But I thought it was interesting. Charles Barkley had something to say about all of this. Not specifically to the All-Star game, but to the idea of what's dividing us. And I want to just play a tiny clip of what, and if you don't know, Charles Barkley's former basketball player, TNT basketball commentator on national basketball commentator. Charles Barkley generally does not have a problem speaking his mind. Listen to what he had to say.
Man, I think most white people and black people are great people. I really believe that in my heart. But I think our system is set up where our politicians, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, are designed to make us not like each other so they can keep their grasp of money and power. They divide and conquer.
So, I mean, I've said this for a while. I don't think it's an exaggeration. The political class, both sides, primarily care about staying in power. They're willing to share power. They'll attack the other side publicly. Then they'll shake hands privately. They'll sit down and have dinner. They go after each other. They calculate it. I worked inside the Clinton White House. I saw Democrats do it. I've seen Republicans do it. It's a ruthless battle to knock the other side down. And corporations are in on it too. And I honestly believe, my experience, what's your experience? I don't know. Do you spend a lot of time interacting with people outside your economic class or your race class? I do. I spend a lot of time around people who are not my same socioeconomic status. And certainly I spend a lot of time around people who aren't white in lots of different communities. And I don't find that in general, we don't get along. Not just me personally, all of us. I'm not saying there aren't real race problems. Of course there are. There are long-term, systemic, historic, and present race issues. But overall, most black people I know don't hate white people. And most white people I know don't have a problem with black people. They're not racist. There's often misunderstandings, of course, and there's biases on both sides. And not just white and black and Latino, white and Latino, and everybody and Asians. I mean, because Asians are the new, racism du jour. They are, let's be honest. But at the end of the day, I mean, are we really that much at each other's throats, or are we just told we're that much at each other's throats? And why do they tell us that? Because it works. It makes sense for politics. It's crass Democratic politics to want to keep black voters voting Democratic. It's the easiest way to do it. Easiest way to do it is to make out anything and everything the other side does is anti-black. And it's crass Republican politics to want to keep voters away from the Democrats by insisting that everything they're doing is evil and it's going to lead to socialism. Ooh, the big S word. Worse, communism, McCarthyism. It's all coming back. Like they're going to destroy the country and their values are horrible. And you should be scared of these evil, rotten, woke people. I mean, both sides do it. How does hate create profit, Tyler? Well, two ways. One, hate creates profit in the media, hands down. Okay. Media entities don't make money if you're not buying their stuff. Hate and fear sell. When everything's good news, and people have tried good news channels, people don't watch. You don't slow down and, watch the cars going by the other way. You see a bad wreck, everybody slows down. You have new wrecks because people stop to watch the other wreck. I mean, maybe it's human nature, but we're drawn. And when we're scared, we cling. When we're scared, we cling to what's secure. So hate makes profit for people because the more insecure and scared you are, the more you want to stay with what you know, the more you are willing to listen to what someone tells you to do. That works in a political context for sure, and it works in an economic context for media outlets who make enormous amounts of money. As for big corporations, and go back and forth, they don't inherently benefit from hate, but they do benefit from anything that keeps us in our little pockets. And there are some exceptions to that, and some companies that I think have been really progressive in trying to create a sense of inclusivity and a different way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, hate makes money. It always has. I mean, heck, look at the military industrial complex back from the 50s on to today, right? Eisenhower said it. We are going, the military wants to have wars. When we're in a wartime mentality, people are scared. They do what they're told. They spend where they're told. It just does. Okay. So what happens when we make it all about race? Let me give you an example. I was talking to some friends of mine, and they're a couple and they're black. And they were talking about the Justice League. Now, if you're a comic book fan, but the Justice League, the Justice League movie came out, and the original movie was being made by Zack Snyder. And Zack Snyder left the project. His daughter had committed suicide. He moved on. And Josh Whedon, right, from Buffy, who's gotten blown up for what he did then, took over. And when the movie was done and out, they just recently on HBO released the Zack Snyder cut. And the Zack Snyder cut's very different. And these friends of mine, and it was been all over Twitter and social media, was why did they minimize all the minority characters? Why are all the minority characters, Cyborg, why are they the tiny roles in the original? And Zack Snyder had much more developed roles for the minority characters. How come it's only the minority characters that got wiped out? They didn't get literally taken out of the movie, but the roles got diminished. And these two friends of mine were saying, it just seems odd, right? Why is it the minority characters that all get squashed? And I thought about it and I thought, isn't it just possible that it had nothing to do with race? Which is the more likely explanation? What you think is like, I also sometimes think the simplest answer is the right one. That these guys the studio went out and decided, despite the fact that black moviegoers are one of our biggest audiences in terms of the number of box office sales, despite the fact that we're growing franchises and want to expand our audience, we're going to literally remove minorities and piss them off because we hate them so much. Even though the head of the studio is an Asian dude, maybe he hates black people too. Is that more likely than that it's just politics and business? One director leaves, another takes over. When that director takes over, he wants nothing to do with the other guy's cut. He doesn't want this to look, Josh Whedon doesn't want this to look like Zack Snyder's cut, so I'm going to make it my own. And he does what he does, and the studio gets their hands in. And one cut here and one cut there, and pretty soon it's a mishmash boom, and you had the crappy first original Justice League movie, which nobody liked because it sucked. Which is more likely, that it was that or that it was about race? And in fact, the numbers don't even add up. When you look at the Marvel comic universe, in fact, 61%, this is 2 years ago, so it's even more now, 61% of all the characters are white and 20% are black. In reality, there's 62% of the American population is white, whereas 13% is black. So technically, blacks are overrepresented. I'm being facetious. They're not, but I'm saying they have a higher percentage. And it goes down a little when it's major characters, but it's still like 19%. And 11% are multiracial. The people who are getting screwed are actually Latinos. 7% characters in MCU and Marvel Comics are Latinos, compared to 17% of the population. They're actually underrepresented. Black characters are actually overrepresented as a percentage of the population. It's kind of a fun stat, neither here nor there in the sense, but if you think about it, right? If you think about it, we are conditioned to make everything about race. And that's what bothers me. We literally have it in us. My friends weren't like vicious or malicious about it. And they were willing to consider maybe it is something else. But at the end of the day, right? Once we're drilled in to see everything about race, we do. We're like programmed and we just hear it and hear it and hear it. So Major League Baseball, boom, look, the Georgia law, it's racial. Yeah, Jim Crow. Yeah, don't even read it. It is. The shooter in Atlanta, he's a racist. He hated Asians. Well, he said he didn't. Doesn't matter what he said. He did. We just start seeing everything in racial terms. The problem with that is that it starts really having an impact, I think, in that it starts making, one, it distorts our view of things. Two, I actually think it kind of creates this divide where people who are on the other side of it start seeing nothing as race. White conservative men go, you know what, you make everything about race. So suddenly nothing's about race. Well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. No, actually, Black Lives Matter. No, all lives matter. They go the other way. Instead of going, of course, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. They haven't mattered enough. As I like to say, Black Lives Matter too, to the people on the right who go, why don't all lives matter? Of course, all lives matter. That's not the point. Black Lives Matter. But they start seeing everything as like, you make it all about race. I'm going to make nothing about race. And it doesn't help the people we're trying to help. It doesn't help the people who are most in need of it. It's just politics. And, you know, I thought it was interesting because if last week, it was a week ago, the Noah Green, the driver, the guy who drove his car into the Capitol police officers and killed one of them. And it was interesting the media coverage that got, because the media depicted it very differently when they found out he was a black guy. First of all, they don't say he's a black guy. They just say he's a guy. But, you know, when the white shooter shot the people in Atlanta, you know, there was, you know, the cop made the horrible statement he had a bad day, which was a effed up statement to make, regardless of what he meant by it. But the media went crazy. But I thought it was interesting. The media depicted, the way the media depicted this shooter. We have a little graphic here, but no, shooter, the driver. But what they said was, they said it was well, I'm quoting one major news outlet, said it was an isolated incident from a young man who was mentally unwell. Okay. That's as bad as he had a bad day. An isolated incident from a young man, not just a man, a young man who was mentally unwell. You have a lot of sympathy for him. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a lot of sympathy for him, but you shouldn't have sympathy for him because he was a black guy versus a white guy. But that's how the race mindset works. The media is programmed into it. If it's not a white person, we're going to lean sympathetically toward it. If it's a white person, we're not. That feeds a narrative. It feeds a narrative of division. It's not about right or left even. It's about division. And I think one of the biggest divisions that gets fed is the black versus white narrative. Black people don't like white people. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to on the street who are black who will tell me, when I ask them, they say, yep, I think the media wants me to hate you because you're white and I'm black. Even if we don't, it feeds a political media narrative that makes money. Now, part of the problem with the whole Capitol driver with the attack, Noah Green, is he was a big Farrakhan supporter. If you guys are familiar with Louis Farrakhan, but Louis Farrakhan is one of the most horrifically anti-Semitic people out there. He's said, you know, Jake Tapper called him, Jake Tapper said he's a vile anti-LGBTQ anti-Semitic misogynist. I mean, you can't get any more in there. Like, that's every single thing you got with vile tapped in front of it. I mean, Farrakhan just hates Jews. He says, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm an anti-termite. And his views have been prolificated, put out there. Chelsea Handlers tweeted things he said. A lot of black athletes and black celebrities have gotten behind Farrakhan's stuff. But here's the deal. Farrakhan's a hater. Crafty, we have a graphic of about the Southern Poverty Law Center, how they deal with Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. So this is the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is like a very prominent organization built out of the civil rights movement, dedicated to, you know, weeding out hate and certainly putting a lens on where it is. It was originally obviously built around racism toward black people. Can you put that back up for me, Crafty? So it was founded in the 30s, and the Southern Poverty Law Center designated hate group. Now, let me just read you what they say about it. Since its founding in 1930, Nation of Islam has grown into one of the wealthiest and best-known organizations in Black America. Its theology of innate Black superiority over whites and the deeply racist, anti-Semitic, and anti-LGBT, this was before the Q, rhetoric of its leaders have earned the NOI, a prominent Nation of Islam, a prominent position in the ranks of organized hate. Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage at that? How is that different? That's still racism. It's racism toward Jews. It's like we underestimate the anti-Semitism that's out there. We're big on this. This is anti-Asian hate month. You know, I mean, again, you know, Twitter, Facebook finally took down Farrakhan's thing. Twitter still keeps Louis Farrakhan's account open. You know, not even blocked, not even notification on it. I mean, they took David Duke down. Thank God. I interviewed David Duke on Fox News. He's a racist. He ran the Ku Klux Klan. They took his thing down, but Farrakhan stays up. Why does Farrakhan's side stay up? Tyler, I simply cannot accept there are on every story two equal and logical sides to an argument. Interesting. I like that. You're doing your homework there, buddy. Thank you. I'm going to disagree. I can't accept that there are two sides. They may not always be equal, but there are two sides. That old joke, there's your side, my side, and the truth, right? The very fact of science, post Edward Murrow, by the way, after his time has proven that memory, by definition, is not accurate. We know our way our brains recall things is very different. Two people can remember the very same thing differently and both think they're right. So when you say there aren't two sides to every story, there really are. I just think there are. And the reality is, whether there are in every single instance two equally weighted sides, this isn't about two sides. This is about the same story. If you're going to be about anti-hate, then be about all anti-hate that's racially based. Don't just pick one side. I mean, shut Farrakhan's account down. Why do you leave it up? Interestingly enough, Tyler and everybody out there, equal and logical. Fair point. They're not always logical, but it doesn't mean the media should be deciding which one is or isn't. It's my job to decide what I think is logical, not the media's, and whether they're logical or not, that's up to you to decide, right? I'm going to make my side. I'm going to try to look at both sides, and I would agree with you. One side may be more logical, but on this very issue, I don't know what you think I'm saying. If you do, it's not logical. But I'm going to use someone else other than myself to kind of back me up on this. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's a well-known Black Lives Matter activist, and more than that, for years, if you don't know who he is, he's a Lakers basketball star, Hall of Famer. Originally, actually from my hometown, the Milwaukee Bucks, was Lou Alcindor back in the day, changed his name after becoming a Muslim, has become very outspoken, a columnist, a writer, a thinker on issues around race. And he pointed out recently how disturbing it was that people in the Black community would make statements quoting Farrakhan, Ice Cube saying, repeating, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm an anti-termite, and Deshaun Jackson, the football player, and Steven Jackson, the basketball player. And he said, and I thought it was interesting because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said, dehumanizing a people is what led to the police actions that led to George Floyd's death. And he says, I hate seeing marginalized people like Black people doing the same thing to others. It perpetuates racism. And it's the very point. You can't look away from it at one side. You can't tolerate it when it goes one way and look away when it's the other. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's point is so accurate. It's like the very marginalization that hurt us, you can't do it to somebody else, and we should be pointing it out. And he have a quote. Crafty, can you put the quote up that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said? Got that quote for me? There it is. Recent incident of anti-Semitic tweets posts from sports and entertainment celebrities are a very troubling omen for the future of the Black Lives Matter movement. But so too is the shocking lack of massive indignation. Given the new wokefulness in Hollywood and the sports world, we expected more passionate public outrage. What we got was a shrug of mirage, which he goes on to say, mirage, thanks Crafty, mirage leads to the apathic clips, apathy clips, whatever, apocalypse. It's all about apathy. And so I think the point, really is that it matters, I'm not sure what's ignorance, Monkey Arms, because I didn't see your earlier comment. So if you put it back up, I'll respond to it. But I thought this was all interesting because, again, I think it does perpetuate racism. And I think we're in a climate where we're perpetuating racism. We make everything about race. And like I said, we then tend to only see the racial side we want. And then a whole other group decides they're not going to see racism at all. And the people most in need of the protection don't get it. Let me use a more recent example. I thought this was kind of sad and interesting at the same time. There was an Uber attack on a driver in San Francisco, 3 women in a car. And I'm going to show you just a short clip, if you haven't seen it, of what they do. She coughs. He wants her to put a mask on. She won't. So he says he'll drop them off, and she goes ballistic on him. Check this out.
They don't fuck the mask. Fucking nigga, and I got corona. Yeah, what's up? Fuck you too. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Put your hands on me. Now you about to get beat the fuck up. Now you about to get beat the fuck up. What's up?
You don't touch my property. You don't buy it.
Wow, right? I mean, geez. Now it's interesting, right? Because the 2 women on the left seated in the car are Black, or one's at least Black and one might be mixed. It's hard to tell. One woman has her mask covering her. And the woman on the right is clearly not white. Turns out she's Persian. And what's fascinating to me is that this got turned into a hate crime. Listen to this tiny snippet of news coverage in the Bay Area about it.
The latest attack against an Asian victim here in the Bay Area who feels like he was harassed and mocked because of his race.
I never curse. I was not raised that way. I don't hit people. I am not raised that way. You guys are animals to treat other human being like this.
Every day we see another one of these horrible attacks. It has to stop.
So here would be my point, okay? You might be going, how is it an Asian hate crime? The guy's Nepalese. He's from Nepal, which is technically in South Asia. But there's no way these people thought he was Asian. I'm sorry, they didn't listen to him and think he was Asian. You heard him. He sounds like he's from India. I'm not saying it wasn't racial, but I don't really think it was racial. I don't think it was about we don't like him because he's an Asian. But that's the narrative of the day. More Asian hate crime. This guy's technically Asian because he's from Nepal, even though most people probably don't even know Nepal is in Asia. A lot of people don't. And certainly you wouldn't listen to him and look at him and think, oh, he seems Asian to me. But it was an Asian hate crime. It wasn't an Asian hate crime. It was a horrific, ugly crime. It's disgusting human behavior. And my point in all this is we make everything into the box we want it to be. You know, think about this. The whole notion of hate crime, and I get why we came up with it, to give a special classification to crime that were driven against a person for their ethnicity, for their race, for their religion, for their sexuality. But if you stop and think about it, almost all crimes that are violent are crimes of hate. And I don't mean that to be like all lives matter. I'm saying, you know, domestic abuse is a hate crime. Rape is a hate crime. Beating a child abuse is a hate crime. Killing someone because they did something you don't like, they looked at your girlfriend the wrong way, is a hate crime. So many things are ultimately acts of road rage. You kill someone in road rage, it's a hate crime. It's acting out of hate toward another human being. What that woman does in the car is hate. Coughing on a person when in COVID, to be like, that's a hate crime. I'm full of hate toward you. But we've created the definition of hate crimes to be a special classification. And that may be fine for legal purposes, but when we put it in there, interesting, Trail Boots. Take a look at how racism was handled in Europe. France has contained the legalities of hate crimes. Not sure. I'm not sure. I'd love to know more about that. I mean, France obviously has an enormous race divide issue. And by the way, I'm not saying we shouldn't have I'm not saying we shouldn't put a special focus and light on crimes that are hate. Although I will say this, you know, the George Floyd trial has been going on, right? I don't know if you've been following it, but today they had a number of police officers, supervisor in training, and the chief of police in Minneapolis testify. And the police chief, who was chief then, said, you know, what he did is unacceptable. What he did is not within our training. He was like, I don't want to be 100% clear on this. He was never trained to do that. He should never have done it. And even if he had done it, he should have taken his knee off that guy when he stopped moving and when he was saying, I can't breathe, and he said it's murder. And the other supervisors, and each side gets to have a chair, right? There's one chair for each person. So George Floyd's side, one person each time can come in, and Derek Chauvin. They took Derek Chauvin's chair away. Why? Because nobody wants to come in and be on his side, which I get. But my point is, CNN made a big deal. Wolf Blitzer made a big deal out of how shocking it is. Look, that the police said this. I mean, the police never say this. I got to tell you, I haven't talked to one single police officer who thought what Derek Chauvin did was justifiable. Not one, white or black. When I did a town hall here in Jacksonville, the white head of the police union here, who defends almost all cops, got right up and said, I want to be clear. And I said it before, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. It was murder. So I don't, but it's part of this narrative, right? And it made a narrative that all cops are bad. What he did to George Floyd was murder. And what he did was horrendous. And I think it was racially motivated. But we now create that narrative and it's about everything. And the bottom line is that who that really hurts, I'm going to say it again, is the people we want to help, because there really are racial problems in this country. Police brutality is one of them, but there's systemic problems. There's economic poverty that's been drilled in from the Jim Crow era that black communities urban communities have never been able to crawl out of. They've never had the resources, and they can't get the resources because companies don't want to invest in broken down inner city minority communities. Why? Not because they're racists, because they look at it as a dollar and cents proposition. I can take this much money, put it in to build and develop an area. Like here in Jacksonville, Edward Waters College, historically black college, has no development around it. It's like a ghetto. Why? It's a school. It's a university. Why not put money there? And their answer would be because it's a high risk investment. I can put that same money somewhere else and make more money off of it without the risk. It's simple equation of economics, but it is a racially driven thing that got us there. If you want to address that problem, if you want to fix that problem, and that's a racial problem. The economic disparity is racial. The lack of hospitals, schools, all that is racial. But we're not focusing on that. Like Charles Barkley said, you didn't see it in the clip, but we focus on who's taking a knee. Who's taking a knee or not taking a knee. And he's not against people taking a knee, but he's saying it's the wrong focus. To be focusing on the real people and the real problems that need fixing and solving that are racial. Those problems, those things, those concerns, those needs are really real, you guys. They're not fake. I've said it before. I spent a lot of time, and I always have, in impoverished communities, working in those communities, being part of them, trying to understand them. There are real racial problems. But we're not solving them by making everything about race. You're just making the people who could help solve them go, I ain't going to even talk to you. I ain't going to even be part of it. So it's hurting the very people you want. If it's worth it for your political agenda, which it seems to be for the Democrats right now, and it was for the Republicans under Trump, go ahead. But it ain't working for me. It ain't working for most people in this country. It's not going to work for a new populist movement in this country. I'll tell you that. So let me end with this. I want to show you a video of this woman, the woman in that car who they accused of a hate crime. Let me just quickly I'm going to show you a video, but let me tell you something about her. Here's her quick rap sheet, okay? Her dad was arrested for sexual battery. Not her fault. She's not responsible for her dad. 2015, she got arrested for battery on a person. 2021, she struck another car, making unsafe turns, being sued. 2020, she got charged in Orange County with burglary. 2020, taking someone's vehicle without their consent. Right? She's got a bad track record. She's not a good human being. I'm sorry. Like, she's a troublemaker. Was it about race? Listen to her apology, supposedly, that she makes on Instagram. And then we'll wrap things up.
All I did was take his mask off and cough a little bit. But I ain't even have corona. So at the end of the day, okay, yeah, I ain't gonna lie. That was disrespectful as fuck. I'm dead ass wrong for that. But it could have been avoided. Period, point blank. It could have been avoided. That's why I take Lyft. Like, I'm finna sue Uber for. They seen the whole video, so they know they dead ass wrong. So where my check at?
I mean, wow, guys. I mean, what an entitled human being. Oh, it's his fault. It's his fault for making me have to wear a mask and then wanting to drop me off when I wouldn't. When I coughed on him and grabbed his phone and did all that stuff. And I'm going to sue Uber and Lyft. I'm going to ride Lyft. And by the way, Lyft came out right after that video and said she's not welcome on Lyft. But here's how I want to wrap this thing up. And at Monkey Arms, you made a comment right before that. And you said, who decided to make it about the knee, the right? I disagree with you really strongly here. But here's why. I'm not defending the right. Okay? Not at all. But there were plenty of people who argued whether or not taking a knee during a game was the right way to protest. And you can go back and forth. I mean, Drew Brees came out, who's been a huge advocate of Black Americans. There's no question. He plays on a team, half his players, more are Black, no one's thought Drew Brees is a racist. And he came out and said, I just don't think taking a knee is the right thing to do. He's like, I don't think it's respectful to people who died in service. I'm all for Black rights, and I'm all for us putting a focus on racism. And by the way, you guys on the left who say that, Justice Ginsburg, the recently passed former justice, liberal icon, when they were originally taking a knee, you can go find it. She's on CBS saying it, and she's asked about it, and she says, I think they're idiots, and I think it's disrespectful to the flag to take a knee. So it's not a right or left thing. And I'm not making it about right or left. I'm simply saying Charles Barkley's point, taking a knee puts a focus on something. That's great. That focus becomes all about canceling the All-Star game, all about this. It doesn't become about real, even Black Lives Matter. And I know I'm going on here, guys. It's a little bit longer show, but this is important to me. It doesn't even matter. It's not even become about making change. How much change have we made in the Black community since the last 9 months of Black Lives Matter? Everyone did their thing, March. Now we're canceling this and shutting that down. How much real change is going on? Go in, and how few of those people in those communities were even involved in it. Go into an inner city community. Ask them what they think about the Black Lives Matter movement. They'll be like, hasn't done anything for me. So I'm not saying every person would say that, but a lot of people would, because it hasn't. We haven't changed anything. We haven't fixed the schools. We haven't even tried. We haven't made any attempt at systemic changes. Joe Biden's administration hasn't either. It's all this highbrow politicizing. That's my only issue. I'm not for the knee, against the knee. I admire Colin Kaepernick for having the guts to do it and take the hit he took, which was destroying his career. He had conviction. But let's not pretend it's led to the real changes that need to be made, because it hasn't. It hasn't led to it. And Monkey Arms, when you say the right did it, you're just back in that left-right polarity. That's fine. Blame the Republicans. Blame the Republicans for everything. I don't care. Neither side has solved these problems, and we've had decades to do it. And neither side's focus is on doing that. That's why I want to come back to an end. Their focus isn't, they're not getting rid of the All-Star game because they think it's going to help fix the right or access for black people to vote. They're doing it because it's a political hit against Republicans. That's all it is. Same way when they tried to impeach Clinton, it was a political hit against Democrats. Like Clinton or not like him. But they impeached him simply because they wanted to take a hit on him, not because they thought what he did was so horrible, even if it was. It wasn't horrible enough that he should have been impeached. Georgia changed voting laws, so there's that. Again, I'm going to end it on this. I know we're going on. Go read the voting law. Georgia's voting law change. I'm going to end. I said I wasn't going to get into the law, but I'm going to. Georgia's voting law changes are not more restrictive. There were no ballot box drops before the COVID election in Georgia. The law requires them. I think they should keep them open longer. That might be considered restrictive, but they didn't have them at all before. They extended the number of days to vote. Their days to vote are longer than New York's. They had the no giving people refreshments in line. Many states do, including New York. Absentee ballots with absolutely no reason. New York requires a reason to get it. They do require an ID to prove who you said, but you don't have to have a reason to get the ballot. And Joe Biden's BS lie that they closed the polling booths at 5 is just completely made up. The old law close them at 5. They allow them to stay open. They have to stay open at least from 9 to 5. So you can't not have them open from then. And they can be open longer. Could you argue it could be more inclusive? Sure. But to argue it's 100% restrictive, it's just BS. It's just buying into the mindset. And either way, it's not helping more people vote. It's not helping black people solve their problems. It's not fixing anything. I don't care. No one's going to convince me. You can say I'm stuck on it, but I am. It's politics. It's what Charles Barkley said. They want to divide us. I've worked around both parties and in both parties. Their goal is not to unify us. It's to divide us, because unified, we might vote for the other side. It's that simple. It's tribal political stuff. My side, your side. And I get people on my side, I got to push your side away. It doesn't help any of us in the long term. It helps some of us in the short term. It certainly helps the parties, but in the long term, the vast majority of Americans, any race, any income class, maybe the rich accepted, forget about them, are screwed by this. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching.